Scott.
It is Friday. The sun is shining. It is May 17th, and we are getting dangerously close to the primaries here in Utah. It's happening fast. Scott Howell is in the house today. Thanks so much for being here, and Greg Hughes, both former leaders of their party in the great state of Utah. So glad you're both here with us.
Happy to be here. Thank
you for the invite.
Although our warm-up to the podcast, you guys are so amicable with each other, they're not going to believe you belong to different parties.
I know. You know, it's just because common sense just maybe, is shared here. There's
Is
common
shared.
ground in politics that people don't want to hear about.
Oh, well, we're
Certainly
going to
Mara
share some of
doesn't.
that common ground. We were all talking about the gym. So I have been trying some new classes at my gym because I'm old enough where I'm like, I've got to get some muscles and figure out what's going on. So I've been weightlifting, but someone talked me into going to boxing class.
There you
And
go.
I went to a strike boxing class, and I could barely blow my hair dry today. I couldn't get my hairs up.
Your shoulders
Yes,
hurt.
we're so tired.
Nobody knows that keeping your hands up for 3 minutes while you're moving them, it
Yeah.
really hits the delts hard.
Yeah, it's hard work. So, I've been working hard on that. You've been hitting the gym too, Scott?
No, I got to get back to the gym. That's
All
my
right.
problem right there.
Boxing, it's circuit training. 3 minute rounds, so your heavy bag's 3 minutes, your speed bag, your jumping rope for 3 minutes. Everything's a 3 minute with a minute break in between. It's a great way to exercise. You don't have to get punched in the face to train
Yeah.
boxing.
And
I
Greg had
learned-
a professional boxer that taught him his class and all of that.
Yeah, I've run with some great combat sports.
So after I get a few
aficionados.
practice in, I'll come to your gym and fake fight you. I don't want anyone hitting me, though.
And I'll referee. How's that?
That'll
I've
be
never
fun.
replicated politics like boxing. I've led with my chin. I'm probably punchy at this point politically. So
Well, we're going to talk about refereeing debates in just a minute because
Sure.
you work with the debate commission. But
Yep.
what I want to start with this week, the bathroom bill that caused an uproar during the legislative session is causing a new uproar right now. People are talking about this, worried about if they've made a bigger mess by the new legislation. So the state auditor's office, since this went into law, I forget what day it was, just a couple weeks ago, there have been more than 12,000 bogus complaints. There might be a couple real ones in there, but at this point it's difficult to tell. So now the auditor's office is saying, why are we policing bathrooms? This isn't our job. And then the bill's sponsor, Kara Birkeland, said the process chosen by the auditor's office, it was his job to figure out what the process was of his own choosing. The rollout's been unfortunate. Hopefully this will work out. Governor Cox, in his weekly address, said, I believe the bill's still the right direction. So Scott, you're our guest here today. What do you think? Did they go the wrong direction on this legislation? Are people just throwing a quick tantrum with 12,000 complaints and this will even itself out, or where are we at?
12,000 complaints is an awful lot. You have to think about that and what they're going to do. I just have one solution. A little plaque that says unisex. Put it on the bathroom doors, and we're done.
with a lock.
With a lock. And let me make that very clear.
Yeah.
But seriously, I thought the first week of the legislature, and Greg was up there like I was, this is all we talked about. And we've got a dying Great Salt Lake. We've got air problems. And I don't know what you thought,
It's sucking the oxygen out of the room.
It's taking it out. And there's bigger things to go up there. They could have done this in one day and said unisex and locked the doors.
I love that idea.
When you say lock the doors, do you mean lock the doors so that each stall's private? Or
Yes.
Okay.
And they have that in Europe, by the way.
It's true.
I've
There were a
actually
lot of
seen that
unisex
around
bathrooms
here too,
there.
like a unisex one where you can but it's a one single stall. You
Yeah.
can walk in, lock the door behind you, whoever you are, and there's not a problem. I like that idea. I got to tell you, this bill, what I would imagine, and I have no inside info on this bill, but I think probably some of the pressure in putting a statute together where you don't want people that are boys going to girls' bathrooms, girls going to boys' bathrooms, whatever that might be. They didn't want to criminalize it necessarily. They probably didn't want it to be someone you would call the cops if you saw it happening. They wanted to just have a way to monitor if it's a rule.
Like if a problem pops
Yeah,
up.
if the government is
Yeah.
expected to have a standard, how do we make what's our checks and balance and what's our consequence if it's not? And so I think they stared at the state auditor's office as a way to just monitor that to see that the law is being followed and not criminalize it per se. But I think that Representative Kara Birkeland, her comment to the criticism has been, we did not tell the auditor's office how to roll that out. We just said it needs to be monitored. I saw State Auditor John Dougal's comment, and I've known John for over 20 years, consider him a friend. But maybe I misunderstood in his interview, but he said, look, all we can do is audit to see that they have a system in place and if it's being followed. But I would say that there are performance audits. There are the number of complaints that would come in, and he could audit if the political jurisdiction that's supposed to enforce that is following up. I do think there's more that the auditor can do in a structure that they can set up. The tragedy in all of it is, I heard some of the clips of some of the complaints, and they're meant to cause chaos.
This is what the clips are. Beep.
Yeah,
beep.
what they are is they're hostile.
They
They're
were
not
nasty.
real. They're not real complaints. And then the real concerns probably get buried in the thousands of ones that are trying to disrupt that system or make a mockery of it to the point where it doesn't work. And so I just think I don't know that State Auditor Dougal said we need a more prescriptive bill, or they need to tell me specifically what they want me to do. Be careful what you ask for. Okay, I don't know that you want the legislature to start telling you step 1 through 5 what they want you to do.
I concur with that.
Roll out a system. 100%. I think we know what the legislative intent of that bill is. Just find a practical way to enforce it.
So does the legislature need to go in and fix the bill, or do they leave it as is and hope people just stop doing fake complaints and only complain if
I'll give you a very wonkish example.
Oh, walk me away.
So when I was in the legislature and we were getting rid of private clubs, but we wanted to make sure that people under 21 weren't going, we were requiring the scanning of license plate or driver's license.
Oh, okay.
And if you looked under 30 years of age, which is a very subjective, determination.
Like I would
someone
probably
looks
get carded.
Yeah.
You
So
would.
I'm still carded to this day. I just understand. No, but they would have to do it. Well, it's hard to. There wasn't a mandated you have to be 30 or younger, but they keep the scans in a database, and then when the DABC would come in, they would look and see if there had been a regular flow of people that were within that age range to see that the law was being followed. I would say in a case like this, you would just look at the complaints. You would look for how they were mitigated, how they were solved.
They were.
You could do what the DABC does for scanning driver's licenses. You could do in this case here, I think, and it would work similarly.
All right. Well, the big conversation I want to talk about is that we're getting close now to the primaries. And it feels weird, like it's coming too fast. I know we've talked about it. It's kind of weird to get to June and when you're not thinking about primaries to be doing it. But I think we're like 39, 40 days out from this. So the candidates don't have long to get things figured out. In the last couple of days, there have been some endorsements, which you can argue whether they matter or not. I'll let you guys tell me. But in the U.S. Senate race, which we've been watching, Trent Staggs got former President Trump to endorse him. And also an interesting endorsement from former Utah Jazz star John Stockton, who was kind of outspoken during the pandemic about medical freedom. So that happened. Brad Wilson has Governor Cox backing him as the former House Speaker. They work together. Greg, you first on this one. Do these endorsements help either of them in this really truncated time that they have to get people deciding who they're voting for?
I think on the margins it might, but I think what's really going to decide this race is media buys. You can be the best candidate in this race, but if no one knows you, they're not going to vote for you. And so I think this race really.
So are you talking TV, radio, stuff
all
in your mailbox?
All the
digital,
media.
radio, TV,
Social media.
There's a lot of ways to get that out, but you have to be. But it costs a lot of dollars to do it. So I think the candidates that are most aggressive and have the ability to spend the most in introducing themselves to the primary voters, because it's an open seat, they're going to see the most success. I think that John Curtis enjoys an advantage in that he has a base of voters in Utah County who refuse to believe he's not conservative. And I think Congressman John Curtis can go over to Salt Lake County and whisper, I'm really moderate. I'm the moderate compared to these guys. Yeah. So that turns out that can get you 35%, 30 to 40. And then you have Brad Wilson, who has a very aggressive media buys and is spending, of the three, I think, that's not John Curtis, I think he's spending the most. Then you have Trent Staggs with the list of who's who of endorsements. And then you have Walton, who's a successful businessman and I think will spend a lot. But they're kind of fighting for this, in my mind, the same voters that are not going Curtis's way. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of splits that lane up a little bit. But I really think what happened to me in 20, and I was the victim of this, is I was being outspent.
You're a victim, Greg?
I'm in the victim class now. I've gotten with the times. That's how I validate myself now. No, I think I was close in the polls. I know I was. Your KUTV poll in June showed that it was all within the margin of error. Yep. However, the media buys mattered in that of the four people running, it really felt like a two-person race between Governor Cox and former Governor John Huntsman. And so I've had even up until this week, very weak, people say, "Oh, I wanted to vote for you, but I was afraid Huntsman would win, so I voted for Cox." Or I wanted.
There's always
I didn't want
gamesmanship
Cox
going
to
on.
win, so I voted for Huntsman. And so there's protest votes. If you look like it's truly a two-person race, that two-person race in the Senate would happen, in my mind, if you had two, and Curtis is already one of them. if of the three others that are running, one emerges as the stronger media buy, the stronger campaigner, the one that voters are seeing the most of, you might see the other people that they like leave those candidates and go to one of them.
So, Scott, there are new numbers out. Before you start, I want to read these from the latest poll. Curtis is at the highest right now, 41%.
Yep.
Trent Staggs at 14%. Brad Wilson at 9%. Jason Walton at 1.5%. The thing I think is interesting, though, is that it's probably still anyone's race when you look at the undecided numbers that are 33%. So that's still a lot of people trying to figure it out. So what will change people's minds? Because most people, I don't think, have times to go to some of these meetings they're holding. Some people who are really involved in politics will go to these community meetings at the park or their library. But how are people going to decide? I've got lots of stuff stacking up in my mailbox.
I noticed now.
So,
You've got the plethora of information right there. Well, let me go back to what Greg said. On the margins is where the delegates are, and definitely Trent Staggs came out of nowhere with the Trump endorsement. Having John Stockton as well, and that got him through the convention. But when it comes down to reality, you can look at Phil Lyman and Governor Cox. I'll bet you Governor Cox wins that race by 30-plus points, just because, again, as Greg pointed out, it was on the margins. So what happens to these candidates who are really vying to get up there? I think it's about the money. And if you look at that AG's race today, it just was reported that Derek Brown put in, he got $150,000 from Prosperity something, I can't remember the name, or some type of group. And his ad buys are so heavy now. They're all over billboards. I mean, people say what you want about a billboard, but when you see Greg Hughes' name go up every 30 seconds on a billboard, or you see a static billboard, that's what's going to make a difference in these campaigns. And the one that has the funding is going to be the one that will come out. I predict that Curtis will win that probably. I think Derek will win the AGs. And I think those are two good examples of who's putting the most money in. If you look at what they have in cash right now, Derek Brown had $159,000 left after a spend of almost $400,000, and then the next ones were way down low. And Brad Wilson has put a ton of money of his own. I think, is it $2 million or $1.5 million?
It's a substantial amount.
It's
it's
lot.
in the millions. Yes.
I have more Brad Wilson mailers in my mailbox than from anyone else, and door knocking too. I've seen his team out and about door knocking. Yeah.
But let me ask you, as a voter, what does that mean when you get a flyer? Does that persuade you, or what does it do?
Well, for me, it doesn't persuade me because I talk to these candidates and know them.
Right.
But I don't know what it means to people. I keep them on my desk and I like to go through them and see what they're trying to sell to us. And the interesting thing is I'm going through, and we were talking before this podcast.
Right.
Please don't tell me you're going to fix the budget. And what are the other things? But they're all the exact same thing, you know.
Utah values. And
and they're all Utah values. I'm going to fix the budget. But how many people before them have said the exact same thing?
Orrin Hatch
have added to the budget themselves and made it, it worse and not better. And so they're all trying to sell you on the basics that somehow never change. So I don't know what changes minds.
Well, I think in this race it's name ID. I really do. I think it's having a picture of Speaker Hughes up there on a billboard, or just media coverage. I really do think that persuades people. And as they're driving along, they're seeing signs. Signs don't vote. Don't get me wrong. They do not vote.
They can't.
But they do leave an impression on someone's mind.
They can leave someone with the impression that someone has momentum. If they see them, if they're seeing them at major intersections or people's yards, it seems like there's an organization behind that. There's momentum behind that. It's true. You can be the best candidate, but people don't know what they don't know, and if they don't know who you are, I will tell you this: an interesting little. There is always a really, really strong emphasis on the digital media and the over-the-air television and radio. But the politicos I'm talking to, or those that are involved in campaigns and elections, this cycle right now, with this very short, it's been short, 8 weeks or 7 weeks or 40 days or whatever it is now. They're leaning a lot more on direct mail. Is really expensive.
Yes, it is.
But they're leaning on that because even if it's from the mailbox to the garbage can in the kitchen,
30 seconds.
That is more time than maybe on the radio or on the television that you're flipping through. And so there's been I think a unique emphasis on direct mail this year.
It's kind of switched from the old days.
That's interesting.
And the other thing that's very effective now that I didn't think would come back are phone calls, personal phone calls. And a lot of candidates are using this technology where they can press a button, they'll call Heidi Hedge, and they know all about you, and they'll say, Heidi, this is Scott Howell. I'm calling with regards to the campaign. I noticed you voted in the last few campaigns, and do you have any questions for me? I'd like to be your new representative.
Interesting. I don't get any of those calls. I do get a lot of texts from both Democrats and
yeah.
Republicans, both parties, and it's interesting to see what information they're sending you, but a lot of texts.
Yes, and that's the other part of it that's really taken off this year. It's different. I've been out knocking on doors. I have a son that's running for the House of Representatives, and I'll tell you what, I have never seen people so anxious to talk. They want to talk. They want to talk, and I think it's COVID that they had messed the socialization, and they want to tell me about why this is bad, why that is good, and
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think that personal contact. I really do. I think knocking on doors is going to make a big difference. And you said that. You've had Brad Wilson
Yeah,
speak.
we've had Brad Wilson's campaign. I always hide when they knock the door because as someone who's on the news, you don't
Right.
really want to talk to them, tell them what they feel. I never sign anything for
Right.
them. So I let my husband listen to their sales pitch, and I'm always sneaking behind so they can't see that I'm there. But yeah, I see them out knocking, and I'll be interested to see in the next few weeks how many candidates make it to the doorsteps and do that.
I'll bet there's a lot.
The smaller the race, the more impact that has.
Yes.
So state legislative races,
Yeah.
that's a really, really strong
Ground game.
That's a strong influencer. Once you get statewide, the
You
return
can't-
on investment
yeah,
gets
you
to be
can't.
a lot harder. But honestly, I do think that the way that the candidates are trying to reach out and make and leave an impression right now in such a crowded race of different races going on, it is a battle for people's attention spans. But to Scott's point, I have been saying I feel zero apathy. Like I used to complain that people didn't care. Like they didn't
Right.
care enough to
Right.
get involved, to lean in. There's none of that now. Everybody's a bit the antennas are up and everyone's like, what is
They
going
have
on
an
around here?
opinion. Yeah.
People do. There's
They
not
do.
a lot of apathy right now.
They
There's
do.
a lot of people that are watching and concerned.
Well, good. I like the idea of not having apathy. I actually just did a podcast for my son in one of his U.S. government classes where we were
cool.
talking about apathy and getting people out to vote. But I think more kids are getting interested in talking politics, which is interesting to me because I've gone to some of our college campuses, save BYU, and trying to find young Democrats or young Republicans. They're hard to find sometimes. But my son has friends on both sides of the political aisle that have been joining different camps or things they go to during the school year or summertime that can sit down and talk politics, deep politics with you. And I'm like, I love this.
Listen, I taught a fourth grade class yesterday, Indian Hills Middle School, and they asked me to come in and talk about the career as a politician. So I had a little form for them, and I said, if you were president, what law would you make? These kids were so freaking smart. One of the kids.
So he wanted more than lemonade in the water fountains?
Yeah, and it was like some were a longer recess, some were. This one young boy wrote, "I believe we should have abortion legal in all 50 states." And then
In fourth grade?
In fourth
Wow.
grade at Indian Hills Elementary, and then one kid raised his hand and said, or it was a girl, said, "Now what's abortion?" And I start to go into this. Well, it's when this, and the
Good
teacher
luck.
goes. That's a question that
Ask your mom and
ask
dad.
your mom and dad. I was so grateful. But my
Yes.
point is, these kids, I am not kidding you. They are not dumb. These are fourth graders. I read Where the Red Fern Goes when I was in fourth grade. These kids are technology savvy. They talked about the races. They said, who would you vote for governor? And they asked me questions like that. And it was fourth grade.
Yeah, I've had, as my kids, they're adults now, but as they were growing up, their peer groups, sometimes they would, if they were, I'm in the kitchen or
Yeah,
they were there,
right.
I would be blown away at how much they were tracking.
Yes.
Some of them, not all of them, but there were.
Yes.
There's a great group of young people that are tracking what's happening, and
Kids hear
hopefully,
what's going on, and some parents
They
are
do.
talking around the dinner table, or they're just hearing the news you're listening to.
That's exactly right. And haven't they been talking a lot about abortion? I mean, it's one of the big issues on the ballot in Florida and other states. And so parents, I guess, who really taught that young man what it is, I was shocked at what he wanted to do.
Interesting. I mean, I can see it. I mean, my kids didn't really grow up with the social media when they were younger. And I remember even when campaigns were going on and just being someone who watches news and is involved in news a lot, they would fight back and forth saying John McCain and Barack Obama just because they heard their names and said it. But now kids, I mean, who are young, if they're on TikTok or Instagram, I mean, you're getting Fed all that.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, I like the idea of kids being involved. What about some of our congressional races? Are you seeing anything pop in any of these? Because we've got a lot of candidates.
On the Democrat side, no. I mean, we're not even having one primary.
I thought there were a couple primaries.
No, there's no contested races. There are for the state legislature,
Okay.
but not for federal, any of the federal seats, and not for governor. So
Brian King he can save his money for a while
yeah,
until the
he can.
Republicans are done
Exactly.
fighting.
So from the Utah Debate Commission stance, we have 18, we've signed up all the candidates that have agreed to debate in a primary debate. And so that's done. And I'd have to turn to Greg to say what he thinks in terms of who's leading who, because I don't really know.
So you have, I think, of our 4 congressional races, every one of them has a completely different story. So Burgess Owens doesn't have an opponent.
He's not contested
He's
yet.
done, so take that one out. I think his name was Paul Miller. Is it Paul Miller?
Yeah, Paul Miller.
So it's easier to campaign to 1,000 delegates than it is to a district, right? So he won. He got 53% of the delegate vote in the state convention. His challenge will be similar to the one we talked about in the Senate race in terms of dollars to introduce himself to voters, whereas Blake Moore, the congressman, is a member of House leadership. He has no problem with the fundraising. They're going to know him very well. So I would handicap that as that's his to lose, because it's going to be hard to raise the money to raise your name ID. Let's go to the vacant seat of
John Curtis.
John Curtis. Okay, that's the 3rd district. That one has 4 candidates. That's the plurality deal,
Yeah,
where
right,
35% to 40 can carry the day. You don't need a majority of anything. The clear winner out of the convention was State Senator Mike Kennedy. He ran a great primary against Mitt Romney back in 2018. And I think he's continued that momentum. He's raising funds. He's doing well.
I heard there was some gamesmanship, though, at the
was an
convention.
attempt. Yeah.
So, but it didn't work. Where I heard, was it Dougal and someone else dropped out and tried to back someone else? Were they trying to get a weaker candidate?
So
or
John
what was
Dougal got
happening?
signatures, so he was getting
He was
through. But
already,
he teamed up
Yeah.
with
Yeah, he did.
Chris Herod, who's been a candidate, but he's also been a former colleague of mine. And I think they were trying to combine their delegate support behind a guy named Zach Wilson, no relation to the quarterback that's now at the Broncos. But that didn't work. I think so. Mike Kennedy got over 60% of the vote, became the Republican nominee, the party nominee. In that race, so you have Dougal, you have State Senator Mike Kennedy, you have a guy named Case Lawrence, new to politics, a successful businessman, well-funded.
He's teamed up with Cox.
And then you
That's
have,
interesting.
and then the 4th is J.R. Byrd, who is the mayor of Roosevelt. Now he's well-funded. He has a lot of resources. He has that rural perspective, which is important. And so, of that race, though, I got to tell you, if we were to go, I would say that Case Lawrence's fundraising power, and he's running such a smart race for a guy we've not seen in the political landscape before. He's a formidable opponent. And then you have, I think, because Mike Kennedy has run a statewide race, and a very good one, a respectable one in 2018, he has the chops and the know-how and the fundraising. So I look at those two as the main two in that race.
I agree with that, on that 100%.
But when you're talking 4 people and you have,
You never
again,
know.
it's such a funny dynamic, because
That vote
J.R.
can get
Byrd can
split.
put a lot in there, and
Yeah.
Dougal never write him off. So that race, our handicapping, I'd say Case Lawrence versus Mike Kennedy, but I'm just barely there because of the other 2 candidates are strong candidates in their own right. The best race I love to watch is the one that's in the 2nd district, where nobody got signatures. You had 2 candidates that were going convention only, so it was live or die in that convention, and it got close. But you saw Colby Jenkins, the challenger, go against Celeste Malloy, who won in the special election to replace
Chris Stewart
last November.
And what Greg is referring to is the power of Mike Lee in that race.
I really think that's what got him
There's no
in the
doubt in my
convention,
mind.
for sure.
I think that
57%. And Colby Jenkins has an amazing story. A Green Beret veteran, but also worked in the Pentagon, advised the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staffs on counterterrorism measures. Is a small businessman now. His daughter's serving at West Point. He's got I think Rand Paul this week just came out and endorsed Colby Jenkins. And then you have Celeste Malloy, who's really coming from that Chris Stewart office and kind of universe, with endorsements as well. The Speaker of the House has endorsed her.
Yep.
And so what I love about that race is it's not plurality. It's one versus another. It's just so
Straight up
simple.
real
It's just
politics.
a simple one candidate
Real
over here,
politics.
another candidate over there. Make your best case. and let the voters decide. And I wish we could get back to that with all these races, that we could winnow it down to 2 people in primaries as well as a general.
And Scott, you work with the debate commission, and the interesting thing is all the candidates this time have agreed to be a part of the commission and the debates that are going on. We've had some past elections where they've said, no thanks, we're doing our own debates. Why are they coming back to it? Have they just decided that it's better?
The number one thing is exposure, media exposure. They get a free hour of primetime media.
Yeah.
And think about how much that would cost to go buy that commercial. And there's no doubt that they jumped right on that. They figured it out. They like the moderators. They like the format of the Utah Debate Commission, which is really, in my opinion, it's nonpartisan. It just wants to expose the citizens to the candidates, and that's where it is. One race that we didn't talk about was the AG race. And I talked a little bit about Derek Brown and some of that funding. But here's an example of a guy who got less than 9%?
Yes.
Less than 9%. Who's coming out roaring because he gathered signatures. And back to Greg's point, that's going to be a very interesting race to see what happens. You got Rachel Terry
from the AG's office, great candidate, good, strong candidate. And then you have Frank Mylar, who was the Cinderella story of that convention.
Yes.
He's one of those, you have a story, maybe you have the story at every convention, but he comes up every once in a while where delegates have no idea who they're going to vote for in that race. And then the speeches. They come out, and there's something that happens. This is how Mia Love took out Carl Wimmer back in the day at the convention because of how those speeches rolled out. Well, Frank Mylar just did such a phenomenal job. He wasn't able to campaign leading up to that. He was in a 12-day jury trial, so he really felt insecure going into there, and then he just crushed it in the primary. So it was a fun story to see in the convention with him.
There's one other factor in this, Michelle Quist. She's running on the
United Utah Party.
United Party. Now, Michelle's a former Republican, and she's got a pretty good following, and she's very bright, a very smart attorney. And how that's going to play into that is going to be very interesting.
For sure.
So
yeah, I can't wait to see. You mentioned Mia Love, and we haven't talked much about her, but I watched a story that CNN put together about her yesterday.
Wasn't that good?
Yes. They did an excellent job, but I'd been wondering how she was doing with her brain cancer, because I think she was originally told that maybe she had a year to live, but she's in a trial right now, and it seems like there's no growth, and it might even be shrinking. So
prayers to her.
I know, best wishes to her. I can't even imagine the stress that's involved with that, and with kids at home. So thinking of her for sure. While we're talking about our debate commission, we learned a lesson here, obviously, in Utah, where they strayed and then they came back. Now we're looking at the national party, and I honestly was thinking we weren't going to be getting any debates at all, or if we were, maybe some third-party candidates. But both Biden and Trump have agreed very quickly to a couple debates, but they're not with the Presidential Debate Commission. It seems like Biden kind of laid out the groundwork. Trump at some point had said anywhere, anytime, any place. So he's agreed to them. Scott, are you surprised that they're just leaving the Presidential Debate Commission behind?
So for Monday night, I got this note. I'm still working at the Biden-Harris campaign. I get this note, and it says, President Biden's going to announce tomorrow they're going to debate on CNN on this date. I mean, it's the end of June when they're doing that.
I think it's the earliest they've ever had a presidential
the
debate
very
in
most
history.
earliest. And it goes on to say that President Trump will pick the second place. And so I'm thinking it was a donation ploy to contribute to this because he was going to, so I didn't pay attention. Tuesday morning, get this call, he's going to do it, and they're on. Now, what's interesting about this is that I thought for sure President Trump would pick Fox. He picked ABC
I
to
don't
host
think
the
he could pick Fox, because the rules that I think Biden laid out is they had to have had in the previous election cycle done both a Republican and Democratic debate. So I think he had to pick between
That makes sense,
ABC,
then.
NBC, CBS. So
That
that's
makes
probably
sense.
where he went.
Yeah, and that's probably what it is. So anyway, the first one is the end of June, and then the next one is in September. Now, why I'm sad about this is because we have started the security procedures up at the University of Utah.
Which is a lot of work.
It is a lot of work and a heck of a lot of money. So on that, I'm saddened that they won't do it. But the CPD is learning a big lesson. Be careful on what you tell these candidates. And if you go in there and say it's my way or the highway, they're going to say, guess what? I'm taking the highway. But I hope they'll keep that last one in October up there.
So what do they do? So both of you can answer on this, Greg. Do they keep spending money and getting ready just in case, or do they just say it's a loss and just say, well, they're not going to do it? Because that's a hard one. You can't keep spending money, but you also want to be ready just in case.
To see any debate schedule turned on its ear the way it was, it would be hard for anyone to spend money towards that. Now, the legislature put money towards the Utah Debate Commission.
$2.5
you don't just
million?
randomly parachute into a state. You got to have some infrastructure to actually hold a presidential debate.
Right.
So there's been all this work done for many, many years to be a state that can hold those. We held the vice presidential debate. That is something that Utah was well poised to do, and I don't know that you can continue to spend money when the sides can change their minds as easily as they have. My take is the rules of this one weigh so heavily on the side of Biden that I think they thought that.
So you don't think it's good for Trump to be muted?
Well, I'll tell you this. When you say, okay, Trump, we're going to debate, it's going to be in June, okay? There's no studio audience. The moderators have complete control of the microphones, and they're going to be Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, okay?
Oh, is that who's?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
These are people that have spent a lot of airtime being incredibly critical of Trump and not so critical of Biden. So I
Trump
think
feeds off that, though. Don't you think he'll just go in there and call him fake news?
I think he feeds off 100%. And you know what? He makes a compelling story for those that believe in him. He really does. And he's going to use. He is so smart tactically on the way that he handles his constituency. They play right into. He plays right into their hands, and that's what he'll do.
Yeah. So there's no one that would look at those rules and how that's going to roll out and think, well, that's level. That's even-handed. It's not. And if there was a hope that he would think the fix is in, and I'm not getting ambushed like that, no, he's going to do it. I actually think I was joking with someone that if they cut off his microphone mid-sentence, and Biden is able to finish every sentence to the degree he can, when it comes back to him with the next question, he'll just keep answering the question he got cut off on. Or he'll walk over to Biden's microphone and start talking off that one.
And he's going to use that as a fundraiser and raise it millions of dollars that night.
So my question is, I don't know that anyone's going to be swayed by the debates at this point, although I'm happy as an American citizen they are. I feel like it's a job interview, and even though they've both been president and we pretty much know where they stand on issues, I think it's their job to go and answer questions and do that for the American people. So I think it'll be interesting to watch. I think people were surprised, Scott, when we watched the State of the Union. The president, I think, was on his game that night, maybe a little overhyped. I don't know if he was over-caffeinated. The question is, do you think he's getting older? They're both getting older, and he shows signs of sometimes that he's showing his age. Can he debate, or are you going to be watching and waiting to see if this is a bad move for Biden?
If there's a big gaffe that he makes on there and a big error. I was in the White House 2 or 3 weeks ago.
And name dropping. What were you there for?
They invited some of us back to have some of this, and unfortunately, a bridge broke in Maryland, and the president put that before talking to us from the Mountain States. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Yes, but anyway, I have no problem with his mental acuity. I've been with him 3 times in the last 4 or 5 months. I have no problem with that. But he's 80 years old. He's 80 years old, and at that age, I hope I'm not doing anything in politics. And I think if his handlers didn't think that he could do this, then I don't think they'd let him. But there must be something in there. And you're right, on the State of the State, he did. He fired it off, and he did a good job. And I think that DJT has gotten so much press out of this trial that has been sucking the air out of politics. And the interesting thing about it, the polling keeps going up for President Trump. During this trial, you'd think that it would go down and people would say, oh, you know.
It feels like electioneering. It feels that these charges wouldn't be uniformly applied to any American at any given time. That there is certainly a political taint to these charges and when they've come out, how it's rolling out. And I think that's backfiring on Democrats if they thought that was going to be a successful ploy. But I'll just say this. The glass half full is that we're going to have a debate, because I could have argued, I would have been convinced
I didn't think it was going to happen.
We were all thought the same thing.
Absent this debate, we still might not have had a debate, because I've heard subtly from Politico, and I think I read it in another newspaper that, is there anything we don't know about these two that they even have to debate? Or, Biden's a little bit more, he's not a grandstander, so he might not want to debate. Now, all of a sudden I'm hearing these strange narratives about why it would be okay
why
not
we
to
should
debate.
protect them?
Yes, and so I'm like, good, they're going to debate. My question is a June debate meant to be, if he didn't perform well, there would be a convention to potentially change your nominee? Is that in the decision tree, do you think?
All cards are on the table.
Yeah.
All the cards. And Michelle
So you believe that
Obama's
is
been,
a possibility. So do you think Democrats could be putting Biden out there and just saying, okay, if he eats it early and then we swap in Kamala? Or?
I don't think there's one card that's not on the table right now. And one of the most strategic moves that the president could make came from Mitt Romney. You should have pardoned him. If he would have pardoned him on all this, there would be none of this.
Well,
they'd be out campaigning, they'd be out doing this. But I'm telling you, that trial has just got some people, they can't turn it off. And then they think.
And there's almost a sense, Scott, you're right, and there's almost a sense of outrage where people are actually looking at Trump a little more seriously because their sense of justice is being offended at the moment. And so when Trump says that Biden should have pardoned him, it's not because he has any kind of love for Trump. It's saying he's winning this because you went through such a
and Romney's
aggressive
never
process.
changed on this. He's been anti-Trump, and he thinks this is helping him.
Exactly. And, you know, when you read that, and Mitt says you should have pardoned him, he should have. I mean, that in my opinion, that would have changed the whole dynamics. But this trial, I can't believe how many people say what just Greg said. I've had bad things happen to me, and I've had the government turn on me, and I've been in a situation where I was innocent, and then they're making me guilty, and they go, "He's my guy. He's my guy."
Well, there's this haunting feeling, I think, is the world gets crazier and crazier. If you're seeing someone like Trump, that they're going after him like this, it's hard to not think to yourself, could that happen to me?
Yeah.
I don't have any, I'm not a billionaire. I couldn't put this kind of defense up. Could this happen to me?
But in the bizarro world we're in, it's not just going to be Trump and his trials that are going on soon. The president's son, Hunter Biden, is going to be having some trials I think could be starting soon too. So we could be living in a world where we're campaigning and we have these dueling trials going on, which is just like, it's exhausting me to think about. But I am very excited that they're actually going to get on the stage together and speak, because I think as the leader of the free world, I think they need to do that. So I think it's good, and I'm going to keep hope alive that maybe in October they're like, you know what we want? They come to Utah.
Thank you, Heidi. And that's exactly what we all should be pondering and praying for, because this is a great state to hold a debate like that.
I'll make one prediction. If not one of these Commission on Presidential Debates occurs as planned, I don't know that you have. I don't know
if it exists beyond this.
I think that might be the end of that.
Of the CPD.
Yes.
Here's the
I
wild
don't know why
card.
you would ever go through all this again.
Yeah, why would you? And what they charge, my goodness. I'm not kidding you. You wouldn't have believed what we had to pay for.
Which is
On
crazy.
the VP, it is. And it's kind of like the Olympics. You know, behind.
So there's some slight bribery in the back where you got to pay them
Well,
some money
there's
to get
all
in.
these crazy things that happen that we end up paying for. And it was really a surprise to me when we did that VP debate of what we ended up paying for.
What did we pay for?
All the security,
Okay.
all of the security, all the infrastructure, anything that had to do with it.
And there was a lot of that. If you were up there, you knew it.
You knew,
it was,
you saw
yeah, it was
President
locked down.
Circle.
Yeah.
That was, we set up all the booths for the international, if you remember. I think I saw you up there that
Yeah,
night.
I was up
walking
there.
back and forth.
Yeah.
And you know, Australia was here, BBC was here,
Yeah.
China was there. I mean,
The world comes to watch when we do these.
And
Yeah.
that's the tragedy, is I don't know how you can even justify going through that process if everything can,
Good point.
the rug can get pulled out from under you, and you've spent real manpower, resources. I mean, it's just, and that won't be net good going forward at all. I think those debates, there was always an argument to be made, and I think it's even being made in our state. Scrutinize your moderators, because I can tell you, if you're going to debate and you hear this is going to be your moderator, and if you read about them and you find that they affiliate with, in my case, something that's left of center or more liberal in their board memberships or whatever they do, you worry that you're not going to get a fair shake. I would imagine a Democrat candidate would hate it if an Eagle Forum board member was their moderator. So I'm saying, just even-handed, you want them to be an umpire calling balls and strikes as well as you can.
Perfect.
And there's been criticism about that, but we could address the moderators, I think, in a way to preserve a structured, unbiased presidential debate.
You can do it.
And I don't know that
can
we're
do
going to
it.
get that
Yeah.
chance. So.
I think they can do it for sure. And If I were in charge of the debate here in Utah, I would say let's wait and see how the first debate or two goes, because if that rare thing happens and they swap out candidates, let's say Biden or Trump gets swapped out, they're going to have those later debates, right? If there's new candidates.
That's true. That's actually good.
That's a really good point. And there's so many dynamics that are happening right now within the Democratic Party. Just all the cards are on the table.
All right, is the wild,
I'm terrified that Michelle
West.
Obama. If Michelle Obama wins, it's just over. Tell you, I hope she doesn't run. I pray she doesn't.
She was here in Utah last week. She was speaking at one of those tech summits.
No. She came in undercover and went to King's Bookstore and went in and signed books and met with people. Nobody even knew.
I saw that, but I thought she was speaking at something. She was in town because of that. She was speaking
No,
some
she came in.
Thing. Okay.
Yeah,
I saw the video and the picture, so she's been in town. So maybe she's covertly
terrifying.
Raising money.
It's very, very worrisome for me.
It's worrisome because he knows she'd do such a great job. That's what he's really saying.
It's true. It is true. I'm telling you.
The
Democrats have to work a lot harder to get Biden in one more term. It wouldn't be a quarter of the work with her. So let's go, Biden. You just stay healthy, buddy. Stay through it. You got to stay to the end.
We're out of time, but I just want to mention really quick that the governor yesterday, when he was at his monthly news conference, mentioned that there likely will be a special session in June, probably, to discuss the controversial bill that would extend the life of the coal-fired Intermountain Power Plant. Apparently, they needed to change a few things in there. Any concerns over there, Scott, if they were to go in there and change the bill a little to make sure that it could operate a little bit longer?
Well, I think there's always concerns when we talk about our environment and clean air, and does that thwart new technologies coming into the state of Utah, i.e. Solar panels and thermal and all of that things. I can't get my arms around what's really happening here. And remember, I'm from Emery County, where there's a lot of coal miners and all that. It's just one of those things that I think it'll be interesting to see what they're going to do to tweak the bill.
I think the whole mindset is that it takes time to roll out other energies. Okay?
Alternatives.
And if you're going to have alternatives, you better, if you're going to turn the switch off on one, you better have the switches turned on the others that you're going to replace it with.
So there's
a
smooth
gap.
transition.
I mean, the regulatory process to get any of these other alternative energies up and running seems to be longer than when the EPA was saying we want coal-fired power plants shut down. And I do think that the coal-fired power plants and our low carbon, high BTU coal in Utah, I really believe that it is not as pollutant as it's described. But you better have your other sources of energy well underway before you turn off the one that's cheap, that's less expensive, and is not as pollutant as people say.
And here's an example of where Greg and I would work together on this, and we'd make this happen. We'd say, okay, you have to have these other entities of power generation. They need to be up and running, and then you transition over. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
The far left says, no, we want them stopped right now. Well, you can't shut down a whole economy of Helper Utah and Price and all that.
Yeah.
On the other side, you just see this, and this would be an example where good legislators would sit down and say, we're putting in a plan. It might be a 10-year plan, it might be a 15. But I do hope we have a great plan here in the state of Utah when we host the Olympics in 2034. I want clean air, so people will always remember us as that, not one of these inversions that might happen.
Yeah, nobody wants a nasty inversion, so we'll have to figure out. We can get some giant fans to blow it out for us.
Hey, we got pumps out of the Great Salt Lake.
If we reverse the fans, something can work, right? I know.
Heidi, you're the best. Thank you.
This is good therapy. Thanks for hanging out with me, gentlemen. And we'll
Yeah,
be back
I want our
talking
listeners
more.
to know that you do an incredible. You have so
She
much
does.
responsibility here at the station, and you produce and get this show up and running. Thank you so much.
And
It's fun.
It's been good.
Amen. I can't say
And thanks for
anything but
joining
thank
us.
you.
And if you're listening and you've always listened in audio format, we're available on Spotify. We're available on iTunes, KUTV.com.
Is
and
the
to
video
those,
on today?
Yes, the video's on.
Okay.
So if you're watching us on YouTube, thanks for joining us in this new format. And this will be fun. We'll be back talking again soon.
Thanks, Heidi.